What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm the Croc-Neck.
I'm Jammin' John.
And we are back with a response video, kind of a part two, like we did with, bands whose debut album was arguably their best album. We asked everyone, like, hey, what do you think are some that should be on the list? And then we kind of debated over them. Well, we're going to do that for bands that arguably got off to a rough start with their debut album. Now, rough start, again, can mean like a lot of things. Like, it could have been just like, bad recording, or it came out at the wrong time, or like the whole production was a mess, or it could have just been like a flat out bad album. Either way, you guys once again gave us a whole bunch of suggestions, and we are going to go over your comments here and see if we actually agree with you guys.
So yeah, that's 100% what we're going to do. We're just going to read comments. We got the laptop here, so we are going live, pretty much, so to speak, as far as answering these questions, and we're just going to go down the list one by one. Wyatt Freyon 4048 actually wrote a small list of things, and we told him, hey man, it's got to be only one. So he picked Arch Enemy's debut album, Black Earth.
I disagree. All right, I like that album a lot. The only thing I don't like about, the early Arch Enemy albums are Johan Leva's vocals. I've never been a fan of his I don't like it, but dude, like riff-wise, they're just absolutely intense, riffy bastards, and honestly, I like it a lot better than a lot more recent albums, for damn sure.
Yeah, because it's got a little bit more of a raw sound to it, and I think the riffs are a lot more, gritty and kind of punchy. The opening track, Bury Me an Angel, is a kicker. Yeah, dude's vocals aren't the greatest, but I don't think it's a bad album by any means. So overall, I gotta disagree with you.
79 Phobia said, Aborted, the purity of perversion. Not bad, but it's a far cry from what they will become. Honestly, I'd agree. Like, I know there's a lot of people out there that prefer, like, a lot of the earlier stuff. Engineering the Dead, Saw and the Carnage Done. I got into this band around Slaughter and Apparatus. That was my first Aborted album. And then I kind of walked my way back, and I really wasn't big into the more raw sound. At least at the time, like, I definitely appreciate those albums a lot more now. But I think there's like a big step between the debut and Engineering the Dead in terms of like quality, songwriting. Like, it just feels way more focused on Engineering the Dead. So, I'd probably agree with that one.
My Aborted listening career didn't start until Gormageddon, The Saw and the Carnage Done, and I never went back. I never went back to the beginning.
You son of a bitch.
Whatever. So I guess this will be my first undecided of the evening, seeing as how I've never heard it.
Walk it back. There's some good stuff back there.
I'll probably go back and listen because I'm a pretty big Aborted fan, so I just never did. But maybe it's time. So undecided for now. Yummers. What's up, Yummers?
What's up, man?
Says, I Hate God in the Name of Suffering. It is not really a bad album, but it reminds me a lot of Crowbar's debut, in which it sounds more like a demo, and their second record is the real first album.
I will agree that Take As Needed for Pain is definitely a step up, especially in terms of production. The production on In the Name of Suffering is raw and muddy, and I think the vocals are kind of a little bit too far in the back. But I don't know, I still really like that debut, just because, like, all right, with Crowbar, that debut album, like, the production just flat out didn't work for what Crowbar really was. And Crowbar definitely explored more melody than I Hate God probably ever has.
Yes.
So where I think, Crowbar really got off to the wrong start in terms of production, in terms of, like, capturing their sound, I think I Hate God kind of got off to, like, the right start in a way, because it's I Hate God. Like, it's just absolutely filthy, gnarly sounding, and I don't know, like, kind of that raw demo-ish approach, it kind of works with their sound, and I still believe, like, that debut really made a name for themselves, and like, oh my god, have you heard this truly disturbing band? Look at the song titles. Oh my god,
right.
Those are fucked up. Now, like, Dope Sick is probably my personal favorite. I absolutely love that album, but I don't know, I gotta kind of disagree with that, like, just because I feel like they still captured the band's essence there, and their essence is, I don't know, like, probably served at methadone clinics.
I gotta kind of disagree as well. I think I Hate God set out to make a dirty, filthy sounding record to kind of present themselves to the world, and they did just that. I Hate God is gross and disgusting. That's just their sound. That's what this record is, and it was a good first interpretation of just the overall sound of this band. Crowbar's debut was pretty rough because I don't think that's what they intended, but I think Eyehategod, I think that sound is what they intended. So.
Yeah, I mean, again, it definitely got better in terms of production. Like, they found a way to get, like, way more crunch than guitars because, I mean, everything is just, like, dense and muddy as hell. I think the bass kind of dominates the mix. But it kind of just works with their sound entirely. Like, it's supposed to be noisy and gross and, I don't know, like, it's the audio equivalent of finding, like, a dead body in your backyard. Like, that's Eyehategod, and the body probably has, like, track marks. Dinko Kurdik 2367 wrote Lich King, and he didn't write the album. Luckily, I own it, Necromantic Maelstrom. And I actually saw this band play a free show in a record shop years ago, and super cool, like, great live band. And I bought both that one and their follow-up at the show, and I gotta agree, just because, Jesus, the production's awful on that first one. The vocals are so out in front, and the drums sound bad. Like, everything just sounds kind of shitty on that album. The music itself is, like, pretty solid crossover thrash. I've seen this band live before. They played at MDF in 2019. They put on a killer show. The songs are goofy and silly and violent. There's even a Violence and an Exodus cover on that album, which is a shame because, again, sonically the album sounds like shit. But I still like the album for the songs, but I'm going to agree just because the production's really hard to get past on that.
Here comes my second undecided of the night. I realize we're not too far into this, but I don't care. I've never heard it, so undecided. I can tell that from the way it was just now described that possibly I wouldn't like it.
I mean, again, musically, I think it's fun. I mean, I like this band too. Like, again, silly songs. They did a song about Ed 209. That's awesome. I love RoboCop references. But again, production on that first one, bad. Like, really bad. User
M2PE3RF4H says, "Here comes the heat. Megadeth. Killing is my business. Piss poor recording, shrill, sounds like a cat shitting broken glass. Virtually no low end, no bass. You can hate me now, Dave."
Dave doesn't need permission to hate. He wakes up and hates. I gotta disagree. Honestly, that's one of my favorite Megadeth albums. Like, it would probably be, I don't know, maybe even top 5. That was the second Megadeth album I ever got, because the first one I ever got was Peace Sells, and that is goated in my opinion. And this is like a good precursor to it. Like, I had the original version. Yeah, the production's kind of so-so, like the guitars were really squawky, but I got the remastered version and it sounds fine. You can hear the bass. Dave Ellison's bass lines on there are really creative. I mean, I think, Dave Mustaine's riffs on there are just nuts.
Yeah.
Like, he was doing like some obscenely technical stuff at the time, and it pretty much, I will say that, Killing Is My Business is one of the best revenge-inspired albums of all time, because that was still Dave being like extra salty about being kicked out of Metallica. And I kind of get it. So he took his drug and booze-filled rage and focused it into a pretty killer debut. So yeah, I gotta disagree there.
I also have to disagree. I think that record kicks ass. Very riffy, very high-paced, like, it just sounds kind of pissed off. It's a banger, dude. All those songs jam. I haven't heard the non-remastered version, so it is possible that, the recording sounds like butt sauce, but I don't know, I've heard the remastered version, and those songs are awesome, so I also disagree.
B. Schuler, 6216, said, "For me, Piper at the Gates of Dawn by Pink Floyd is the obvious choice." I agree, and honestly, I'm not a big fan of the Syd Barrett stuff. For me, like Pink Floyd, like the Pink Floyd that I absolutely love, starts at metal and then carries on after that very successfully. The Syd Barrett stuff it's just kind of weird. He was a really weird dude. It had been a while since I had revisited this album, so I decided to jam it today, and it hasn't aged very well in my opinion. It sounds like someone tried to write the score to a James Bond flick on mushrooms. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, the songs like kind of have, again, that like 60s rock sort of vibe. Like, it's the Beatles, except the Beatles were on Quaaludes trying to play the songs.
I mean, during the Beatles drug days, they were probably on Quaalude.
Yeah, but I think they could pull it off. Sid, I don't know. Like, I just didn't like his songwriting. This is before, like, David Gilmour really became, like, a prominent figure in the band. I don't even think he was in the band at this point. Yeah, so, yeah, I agree. Like, again, a lot of the Sid Barrett stuff, I kind of skip. I go right for, arguably the good stuff.
I actually started at Animals for Pink Floyd, and then I went back, of course, to Dark Side of the Moon, where I think most people went.
Yeah.
I think anybody who's anybody tried to sync up Dark Side of the Moon with Wizard of Oz. But yeah, I started at Animals, went to Dark Side of the Moon, and I never went like back beyond that in the discography. I only went forward from there just because I didn't. And I'd heard rumors from people that I knew that liked Pink Floyd that said don't go back. So I never did.
Listen to Metal. Like, Metal, that's the one with echoes on it. That
Okay.
is absolutely brilliant song.
So I'll say undecided, but as an addendum, I'll say, like, I just never went back. Boss Antelope 8658, what's up, boss?
What's up, man?
Says, quite a few albums come to mind, but if I had to pick one, Judas Priest, Rock and Rolla.
Agree. I mean,
okay, all right.
It's a fun album.
Yep.
It's not, like, terrible. It's maybe a little dull. I like the title track. Like, I don't know, it's got kind of like a disco boogie. But, like, almost everything else in the discography, I think, is better. Like, there's definitely some other ones, I think, that are much bigger turkeys. Demolition is still, wow.
Yes.
Just bad. But that really was them getting off the wrong foot. Like, the label was bad. They were absolutely broke, and they were kind of still searching for the sound. Like, at no point on that Judas Priest album does it really sound like Judas Priest yet. By the time they got to the second album, like, okay, we got something going on here.
I mean, I'll agree, but I really like Rock and Rolla. I mean, it's not Judas Priest yet, but, like, I like the swagger to that album. If you watch their discography ranking, I talk about it a little bit more in depth, but, like, I agree with you, but I also kind of like that record, just for totally different reasons other than it being a Judas Priest record. There's certain things I can jump on board there as a music maker in my life and a music fan that speak to me in different ways. There's obviously better Judas Priest, so, and yeah, this record is not Judas Priest. It is, but it's not.
I mean, honestly, if I didn't want to listen to Judas Priest, but also I wanted to listen to Judas Priest, I would probably pick that album.
Yeah, I guess so.
Legions666 says, Napalm Death. Their first two albums are pretty rough in my opinion. The recording is pretty low quality. Plus the songwriting is not exactly at its best either. Not to mention the horrible vocals. To me, they really came alive with Harmony Corruption. Ah, God. All right, this one's tough because, all right, with Scum, I agree that album, it's uneven because there's two sides to it with two different lineups. No original members at that point, too, by the time you get to side two, which is just kind of insane to think of because that band changed lineups so much before they even recorded anything.
Yeah.
But I feel like I could make an argument for side one, the side with Justin Broderick. That's the side that everyone, I think, really likes. Like, I mean, the Lee Dorian side, I'm sure it's got its fans too, but I think the better music is on side one to Siege of Power, the title track. I really like that side of the album. But if we're talking about an entire debut, just because, again, like lineup changes, production issues, like, because it had different production on each side. Side one had great production, I think. It sounded gritty and raw, but it was still, like, intelligible. Side two sounded like it was recorded inside of a dumpster. So, I gotta kind of agree in a way. Like, I love that album. It is a landmark album. It influenced so many damn bands. But I think it's only kind of, like, half good because, again, like, side B is just... It's not my favorite.
Right. I agree with that. I agree with that statement. Yeah, I agree with you as far as the first couple albums being rough. And Scum is pretty fucking rough.
I like the second album. I'll be honest. I like the second album.
I did too. I like the second album, so I can't really say too much there. But yeah, Scum was a trip to get through. And there are two different schools of thought within that album. And the first one being the better one, and the second one being pretty fucking bad. I'll agree with you on Scum, but not From Enslavement to Obliteration. Like, From Enslavement to Obliteration is a pretty damn good record.
I think that's the blueprint for a lot of grind right there. Like, probably more so than Scum to some degree, I would say.
Eric Dudka 6820 says, I just thought of this one, but I find Voivod's first 2 records to be really boring. Maybe that's just me.
Man, I kind of agree in a way there, just because they got so much better, and I think Killing Technology is like the big kickoff in terms of like them starting to find their sound. And like those first 2 albums are kind of just like weird punk albums. Like, I really wouldn't even say they're like entirely thrash. Like, they have thrash elements, but you just had some young kids that wanted to write some crazy and very original stuff. But I think they got like so much better. So I kind of got to agree. I still like them for what they are, but like Voivod really starts at Killing Technology for me.
Yeah, I've never heard the first 2 albums. My, again, introduction into Voivod was pretty late too. I didn't get into Voivod until we saw him live in 2019, and I just liked what I heard when we saw him live, so I listened to what they were currently on, the album before that, and then where they are now. So that's pretty much my Voivod listening thing. And I can tell you this too, even without having actually ever heard those, I'm not the world's biggest punk fan to begin with. And I'm not, but I mean, I like Voivod as they are now, which is just in pure insanity. So although I haven't heard it, I guess I would agree with you based on the factors that we have.
Gravy1255 says, Symphony X, it's a good album, but in my opinion, they would have gone nowhere with that sound. I'll be honest, I haven't listened to much Symphony X at all. I've just kind of never really just kind of went after them. Like, I don't know, like I heard a couple of tracks on a compilation, and at least at that time I was like, no, this doesn't sound like it's for me. Like, it's at least what I thought could be described as like power prog. And, you know, I'm still kind of like, again, branching out into the more power metal realms. I'm trying to give some of it a chance, but yeah, I can't even compare it to any of their other albums too. So I got to go undecided.
I'm also going to go undecided. I've never been a Symphony X fan, and outside of hearing them in random playlists, I just... that's not my jam. Like, power anything is not really my jam. So, yeah, I'll go undecided. I've never heard it, and I don't intend to either. Yeah.
Symphony X ranking coming soon.
Right. Jason B328 says, Galactic Cowboys. It wasn't terrible, but the follow-up, Space in Your Face, blows the debut out of the water.
I mean, I don't think it was a bad start. Like, I'm a big Galactic Cowboys fan. I've been a fan of that band since I was in high school. And Space in Your Face was the first one I got. I do love that album. The song You Make Me Smile, the riffs on that song are absolutely incredible. But, I don't know, I like the quirky, kind of heavier energy on the self-titled debut. It's just a fun, weird album. It's kind of hard to classify. Like, it's kind of prog metal. It's kind of thrash. It's kind of groove metal. It's definitely a little bit of King's X worship too, for sure. I mean, I think those dudes end up doing like backup vocals in some of their albums. I gotta disagree, honestly. Like, I really like that debut, and there's, you know, some stuff after Space in Your Face where I think it definitely got weaker. Like Machine Fish had good songs but rotten production, and then there was a bit of a drop off after that. But the last album I thought was a step in the right direction. But yeah, I think that debut is awesome.
I've never heard it. So I'm undecided.
Undecided John, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi. It's been so long. I'm glad to be back. Thanks, I'm here all week. I'll just pat myself on the back because I know none of you guys are going to do it. So.
Well, you made at least the decision on which shoulder to pat. That's good.
I did.
It wasn't like, do I do the right or the left one?
I'm going to pat myself on the other shoulder just to really drive it home. But yeah, never heard it.
Piranha Whale 1 says Edge of Sanity's debut, which is Nothing But Death Remains. The remix is good, but the original master and production is rough, and the riffs do not have the ability to shine like they do on the new remix. I'll be honest, I haven't heard the new remix. I have, I believe, an original one, or at least an early print of it, and I mean, all right, this is one of those cases where I do like the album. Yes, the production is kind of muddy, and man, like, you know, for like that Sweden sound, those guitars might have been missing, like, you know, the real crunch I was looking for. But while I don't think it's bad, literally every album after that got so much better. Unorthodox, The Spectral Sorrows, Purgatory Afterglow, Crimson. Crimson's one giant 40-minute song that whoops ass from start to finish. Dan Swano just kept getting better. So it's a good starting point, but again, everything got better. So I'm gonna agree. I still think it's good, but I agree.
I've never heard it, so.
We bring up Dan Swano all the time.
Oh, I know,
too.
I know, and I'm a Dan Swano fan, and there's that, but I've never heard it.
You need some edge of sanity in your life.
I do. I need a lot of things in my life, you guys, but edge of sanity would be one of them. You know, you guys got to all remember, I was not raised in a home where metal was allowed. My metal journey didn't start till I was almost 18 and moved out of the house. So a lot of what I missed, what do you want me to do? So undecided. So back to the back, Patton. You're welcome. Next we have Dom138, who says Sumerian Cry by Tiamat. Their early death metal stuff is pretty solid. Apart from that album, it feels a bit uneven, and they did better later on Astral Sleep.
I will agree. I think they did better on the Astral Sleep. I think that's where they started to kind of morph their sound. Like that album, I wouldn't call like purely a death metal album. There's a lot more going on with it. But Sumerian Cry, like at its core, I think is a good album. It's just, you know, the mix is like super, super muddy. And, well, I went in the archives just because, you know, I wanted to see what people were saying about it. And, of course, archives reviews can be a lot of fun. So, the archives review that I looked at of Sumerian Cry, one of the paragraphs started off with this sentence: "The drummer plays blast beats like a complete asshole." And, well, I kind of agree. Like, there's songs that the snare just completely disappears when he's doing a faster blast, and it drives me nuts. It's like everything else, like, loud as hell, and then the snare is like, shh, don't wake the baby. I honestly prefer, like, you know, like Wild Honey and The Astral Sleep to the debut. I mean, the debut's got some good songs in it. It's just, I don't know, it's kind of clunky and uncomfortable, like they weren't, like, very comfortable doing death metal, like they were already thinking about what they could do next. In a way, I kind of agree there. I still think it's a pretty decent album, but yeah, I'll go with agree.
I want to be completely honest with you guys. Of course, you know what I'm going to say, but I want to be completely honest. I did jam this while he was upstairs having a cigarette. And just so I could say I listened to it, but I'm not going to fill you full of bullshit and say I agree or I disagree. I'm going to say undecided, although I will admit that Sumerian Cry, the mix is really rough. You know, it was mixed in 1990, and of course, so it's muddy and it's trebly and...
Good albums mixed in 1990, though.
Right, but this was not one of them.
No.
The mix was bad, and yeah, the drums are a bit off, and yes, his snare disappears, and whatever. You know, in the beginning, you're trying to find yourself. And then I went and, of course, listened to a little bit of Astral Sleep, and I have to admit, while the guitars are mixed better, the drums are still not mixed the greatest. It's better than Sumerian Cry, but it's still not mixed the greatest.
All right, next up we have one from, it's either Joe RG721 or Joe Urge 721. Dealer's choice. Maybe a bit controversial, but Metallica's Kill 'Em All. According to him, it was a very rough start in my book. Cool songs, but the vocals are bad. The drummer couldn't keep the timing. I mean, it's Lars.
Yeah.
So rhythm guitars and drums are off more than not. I can't stand it. Oh, that last sentence there. Ooh. I like that album a lot.
I do.
Honestly, I would take Kill 'Em All over most of Metallica's discography.
Yep.
So it's a hard disagree. Dude, Four Horsemen, Phantom Lord, got Metal Militia. There's so many bangers on there, dude. Motor Breath. Yeah, that opening fucking, like, fill is... It's clunky as hell. It's like he's throwing drumsticks at his set from across the hall. Whatever. I still like it. It launched thrash. Like, that is like a watershed moment there in terms of like, hey, new genre alert. Watch out for these guys. They're going to wreck your club. And yeah, a whole bunch of thrash bands, you know, kind of rode that wave too. So yeah, I got to disagree. Like, I think at the time they got pretty much exactly what they wanted, except for a better drummer. They didn't get that. But, I think it's a landmark album. I gotta disagree.
I agree with Nick. Now with you. First of all, I'm not really a fan of modern day Metallica. Everything after Injustice, in my opinion, is just kind of... First of all, the drums... We've said it 1,000 times on this channel. I'll say it one more time. Lars is not a great drummer. But outside of Lars, especially in the early days of Metallica, again, they were trendsetters for thrash, and I adore thrash. In fact, most metalheads I know adore thrash. They started a whole new genre. They came out swinging, and really, like, the first 4 albums are just gold.
I mean, to be fair, there were, like, you know, some other bands around that time that were, you know, also around. I mean, like, Excess was kind of like the house band of the whole Bay Area scene there for a while, but Metallica got signed, and that album made a big splash, so I gotta give them a lot of credit there.
Yep. December Souls Official says, "The Strength to Dream by Warning is kind of rough in some areas. I don't really want to say that because I pretty much worship their music, but it just sounds rough at times and kind of forgettable." Once again, I'm not going to lie to you, I had never listened to Warning until he went up to go smoke a cigarette, and then I jammed Warning. It is kind of rough in some areas, but to be honest, just from what I heard skimming through both of the albums that Spotify had, it wasn't a bad listen. I just have to say undecided because I'd never heard him prior to today, but I actually would probably spend some more time with this band and be able to give you a better valued opinion.
I jammed this years ago when we did a viewer response for worst metal albums, and someone brought up a Warning album, and I think a lot of people responded like, "Dude, what are you doing? That album's awesome." I jammed it, and I mean, I liked it, but there's not enough for me to really say it's a rough start because I didn't jam the other one. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go undecided on this one just because I don't have enough information on this band to really make like an actual statement there, but it's definitely a band I want to check out a little bit more of. Spur1 Denmark says Dimmu for all tid, which means for all time. Compared to what came next, i.e. Stormblast and Enthroned Darkness Triumphant, that album's awesome. As far as melodic and atmospheric black metal goes, I find a lot to enjoy in the somber moods of For All Tid. It's low-budget production, creating a fuzzy tone on the keyboards, etc., but it stands absolutely no chance against the next two, which also saw them catapulted into black metal acknowledgement and controversy over the commercial direction. Yeah, like Dimmu Borgir is not like the darling sons of Norway, because I feel like if you bring them up around anyone that actually has like corpse paint on and chains and shit like that, what fucking hot topic black metal? Fuck you. God. Because I actually do like that album. It's been a long time since I've sat down and jammed it, and admittedly, I will go for Enthroned Darkness Triumphant more often. God, see, I kind of got into that band around that album, and then, honestly, Puritanical, which is totally a poser album. I still like it, I don't care. I'm going to go undecided, just because I think there are definitely worse albums in Dimmu Borgir's discography. And that one kind of stands out as being like a little bit more unique. It's, you know, way more raw. It's way more, I don't know, like cult true, maybe? I don't know. I feel like if I say that, someone's going to jump down my throat and say, no, it's not. But I don't know. I think it actually has an appeal towards like, you know, people that really get into like more underground black metal. Like it does have more of that sound. So I'm going to go undecided because I like still like a lot of that later stuff that, you know, black metal fans hate, but I also like their earlier stuff too. And yeah, it's somewhere in the middle.
I'm also undecided. Again, I jammed that record while he was upstairs smoking. I've heard Death Cult Armageddon, I've heard Stormblast, and I've heard Enthroned Darkness Triumphant. And those are the only 3 albums I've ever heard by Demon Burgers. Once again, it is what it is, and I've listened to it, but I'm not going to bullshit you and say, like, yeah, I agree or disagree based on what I know about the band. I've only ever listened to 3 albums, and I don't mind them. Even when I listened to them back then, like, it was decent because I thought their drummer whooped ass. I mean, pretty much.
Which one?
That.
I mean, they had Hellhammer for a while. They had Nick Barker. They've got some top-tier talent in that band. It just keeps leaving. Best of luck, Galder. You know, bring back Old Man's Child. Looking forward to that.
Yeah. I still never really got into them so much, per se, and maybe I would now as a more seasoned listener, but I'm going to go undecided once again because I'm not going to bullshit you guys.
Beanie Dogs. What's up, man? I do remember Pitch Shifter's debut being quite gritty and underdeveloped in comparison to their later material. You're right. I'm actually going to agree with you because stay tuned for a collection update because I finally got a copy of Industrial. It sounds so much like Godflesh, like you could just put it on in place of Godflesh and people would assume it might be Godflesh, like right down to like J.S. Clayton's vocals. They use the same damn drum machine program. Like that band was born content living in Godflesh's shadow. Like, yeah, no, we're Godflesh Jr. Their logo had the big block letters too. So I'm going to agree. And weirdly enough, I got into Pitch Shifter with pitchshifter.com, which is not anything like the earlier stuff. But I still appreciate the earlier stuff. Like, I think Desensitized was a lot better album, and I still really like Infotainment, too. But that first one, I mean, Imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. Yeah, it's, like I said, it just sounds like Godflesh, so there's almost, like, no reason to really listen to it if you already have, like, Street Cleaner or any number of Godflesh albums.
I'm undecided. I've never heard it. As an addendum to that, I was never really into industrial metal outside of Fear Factory and now some Godflesh in recent years, and that's why I skipped it. That whole genre of metal never quite did it for me, so I never just really went there. And I do know of Pitch Shifter, and I've heard a handful of songs over the years.
I've seen them.
Well, good for you.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're pretty fun.
But it just wasn't for me, and that's why I never listened to it, so undecided.
Well, good news. If you've listened to some Godflesh, namely Street Cleaner, you kind of have listened to this.
Well, then I've kind of listened to it, so I guess I would agree. Abraham on Twitch says Slipknot with Mate Feed Kill Repeat. I've seen it considered an album, but I've also seen it referred to as a demo, so I don't know if it counts, but I think it's pretty rough. It is pretty rough. In my honest opinion, it's not Slipknot. I mean, it is, but those songs are really rough, and I don't think they had found their sound yet. Corey wasn't in the band yet. I think you could call it a whole different band, even though it wasn't. It was just missing some integral members, and I'm not a big fan of that record, so I will agree with you. I'm not a big fan. If
we're counting it as the first album, I will agree with you. I would say it is a demo. Yep. I'm just going to go with that, but I have a boot of it I got years ago at a record store, and yep. It was not too long after I got the debut album, yep. Which just, yeah, I consider it a demo. And I was like, yay, more Slipknot. That's awesome. And then I listened to it. I was like, what the fuck is this piece of shit? This is terrible. Like, the songs drone on forever. There's, like, just, like, needless, shitty noise going on. And I don't even think Corey's presence could have saved that album. It's just bad. Like, I don't like that album at all. And while there are some riffs present in that album that are in the actual debut, that I would say, yeah, it's not good. And I've listened to it under the same pretenses because, you know, the first album was out, and then I was like, oh man, more Slipknot, and I popped it in. I was like, no, dude, no. I just wasted $15. Right. Because I also have a boot demo. Kyle McNeil, 3477. Huey Lewis and the News, self-titled. The sound is thin and sparse. It's like the new wave albums of the time. Actually, yeah, I totally agree there. Songwriting is uneven and does not match their later output. I 100% agree with that last sentence. They kind of started off as, I don't know, like they sound like the Romantics except with Huey Lewis and his iconic vocals fronting them. It never quite fit because you had like a kind of blues singer running a new wave band. And I would say Huey Lewis starts with like Picture This and then goes on, and Sports is like fucking god tier. I love that album. But yeah, I would agree. Like, I do like that album though. Some of My Lies Are True. I love that song. Who Cares is a really good one, but it doesn't quite gel. And I would say like this is like one of those like failure to launch albums because the songs were good, but they were trying to fit in with a crowd that I don't think they were ever completely sold on. And when all the like rhythm and blues, you know, kind of stuff came out in the later stuff, it's like, yeah, this works. And yeah, honestly, it became like one of my favorite bands as a kid. Dude, like Huey Lewis, I thought was like one of the coolest dudes on the planet. Like him and, Phil Collins and Robert Palmer, because he had like, you know, hot, like pouty chicks that surrounded him. And it was like, I want to be the well-dressed guy with the slick back hair with the hot pouty chicks that can't play their instruments behind him at all times. I just thought that was cool. I will agree with you based on the fact that the production is pretty bad and thin, and there are a couple songs off that record that I like as well, but Sports
was a brilliant album, and that's where I kind of really picked up on him. And of course, The Power of Love being in Back to the Future, like, that's what really got me into Huey Lewis and the News, was The Power of Love being in Back to the Future. And
my mom still got the copy of Sports.
Yep.
Yeah. Dude, Heart and Soul, dude, that riff on the chorus.
Yep, but I will agree with you. It's pretty rough. Again, wasn't really what they became. It was kind of like the Rock-a-Rolla effect. It was just someplace that they started, and then they evolved into, something great. Snazzy Vazzy says, Local H, Ham-Fisted comes to mind. I have heard 2 songs off of that record, Bag of Hammers and Mayonnaise and Malaise. And then the next record, As Good as Dead, had Bound to the Floor on it, and a handful of other songs that I enjoyed. But as quickly as I was into Local H, I was out of Local H. So I'll agree with you, Ham-Fisted was not all that great. As Good as Dead was good, but then I fell out of that band. So I don't know if my agree means anything.
I'm gonna have to just go with Undecided. The only song I really know is Bound to the Floor. Yeah, I heard that in the radio and I thought it was cool. I think my sister got the album. I didn't, and I think I heard maybe one other single, and I was like, okay. And yeah, I really never followed up on them, so yeah, I can't really make a decision on that one. BJ Waters, just pulling from my previous list, Cirith Ungol, Frost and Fire. While it starts all right, the album kind of shifts into weirdly generic, uninspired rock with some strange synths here and there. I'm Alive is a good track. The rest doesn't really linger. The second album, King of the Dead, is where they work out their sound, and it ends up being way more consistent. Okay, I'm not the biggest fan of Cirith Ungol. I like the music. It's the vocals. I don't like the vocals at all. They drive me nuts. I don't even know how to describe them. I get that this band is hugely respected in terms of like underground heavy metal, doom metal, and they frequently have awesome artwork. There's like character arcs and stuff for all the things they bring up. I can't get into them. I even have like a collection of like live stuff and demos that I got a while ago, and I revisit them. I even went over the last album, and yeah, no, it's still the vocals that bother me. So I'm just gonna go with Undecided on this one. Who knows? Maybe one day it'll click for me, but I don't think that's gonna happen because I've tried multiple times.
I'm gonna go Undecided as well. I've never really jammed this band. In fact, knowing that now you say it's doom, maybe I will check it out and just form an opinion for myself. I thought they were black metal, and as you all know, I skip over most black metal until recently. I thought it was one thing, it might be another, and I like doom, and maybe I need to check it out. If the vocals are that bad, though, probably not.
The music's good. The music is really good. Well, but the vocals.
Well, we'll see. So I'll form my own opinion here with it. I'll check it out. Alex Pasokin, 9683, says, Anthrax, Fistful of Metal. I had heard the classic Anthrax albums first, so when I finally listened to this, I thought the songs were just weak, and Joey Belladonna was not the vocalist. The album art is also kind of classic for the genre, but weird and not great at the same time. That being said, it's been decades since I've actually listened to it, so I'm due to give it another chance.
Kind of agree. Actually, I'm going to go Undecided on this one just because I still kind of like that album. Like, yeah, it doesn't have Joey Belladonna. Neil Turbin is kind of an acquired taste. But, man, there's some absolutely ripping songs on there, dude. Howling Furies, Death Rider, the opening track, whoops ass. Metal Thrash and Mad, catchier than hell. But I will admit that I've heard, some of these songs sung by Joey Belladonna, and I was like, oh, wow, they're better now. The production, it was kind of on par for thrash at that time, and, I think the songs themselves were fine. I really wasn't a big fan of the, Alice Cooper cover of I'm 18. It just felt like it was thrown on there last minute. But, I don't know, I'm going to go Undecided. Like, I can't say it's necessarily a rough start. The album art is trash. Like, I don't even get the perspective where that works, where the fist is going through the face, and like I don't know, dude. I think that was just a dumb art piece, and I'm like, fuck it, let's keep it, I guess. But overall, I still think it's pretty enjoyable.
Surprise, surprise, I'm going to go undecided. I've heard a bunch of Anthrax, but I couldn't tell you which songs belong on what album. I've seen Anthrax live, and they were absolutely killer. I don't think I'd actually listened to a full record until Attack of the Killer Bees, and then again, years later, I didn't listen to a full Anthrax album until Worship Music came out. So, like, while I'm a fan of the band, I just never really dug through it all, and I like Anthrax, so I guess I have no excuse, but I have to go undecided.
Shreddy Krueger 359 says, didn't catch the first one, but I wonder if you guys went with Soundgarden Ultra Mega OK. Has some good songs, but it pales in comparison to their later catalog, which is brilliant in my opinion. I agree with your opinion. For me, I kind of got to agree. Like, that first album is, it's kind of all over the place. Like, I feel like there's like kind of parts of noise rock in there. Like, it was definitely like kind of that early grunge sound, but it really wasn't like as like focused. Like, all the songs felt like kind of loose and weird. Ben Shepherd wasn't even in the band yet, but you still had Kim Thale. The songwriting, I mean, at times, like, you could just hear the potential in the songs. Yep. And I think that came out a little bit more on Louder Than Love, and then big time on Bad Motorfinger. That album whoops ass. Super Unknown, it's like one of my favorite albums possibly of all time. Yeah, I kind of got to agree on that one. That first one, I don't think it's necessarily bad. It's just weird. Like, it doesn't feel like Soundgarden yet. And granted, I got into them with Super Unknown. Yep. So that was kind of the standard. And when I heard the earlier stuff, it was like, that's definitely Chris Cornell. What the hell is the band doing, though? I don't know. Like, are they a punk band? Are they a metal band? Did the Melvins or Butthole Surfers stand in and play backing tracks for Chris Cornell to sing over? Again, it's just sort of an odd album.
I'm going to go ahead and agree with you as well. I thought it was a very unfocused album, and I thought like it was just kind of like a hodgepodge of sounds that they had, and they weren't real sure what to do with it yet. And that's kind of, I don't think they knew the direction they were going to go. I think they just tried a bunch of things, and nothing really landed. There are a few good songs on that record. I got into Soundgarden with Bad Motorfinger, and then, of course, Super Unknown blew my mind. So yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I just don't really think that they had an idea quite yet of what they wanted to do. Human Brisket 7718. That sounds entertaining.
Sounds delicious.
Yep. What about the first Motorhead? Half of it is covers, yet I really enjoy the covers.
I agree. Yeah, like that first Motorhead, I picked it up, God, I think like last year. I was like, hey, there's the first Motorhead. I don't own that one. And you can definitely hear like Lemmy just kind of playing in a comfort zone, like playing to his influences. And a lot of that is just like, you know, classic rock and roll. I know like Little Richard was like a huge influence on him. You can almost hear some like Bill Haley in the comments, except, you know, Lemmy-fied. Yeah, like I got into Motorhead with like a greatest hits, and then I got Sacrifice, which came out in 95, so way off the mark from the debut. But that album, I think, is like low-key just a nasty, heavy, dark album. But then I got Overkill, and that's the sound I think of when I think of Motorhead, like that earlier sound. And it doesn't include that debut because it's, again, it's almost just like, you know, like a demo you hand out, like, yeah, these are things we're working on. Plus, we threw in some covers to pad out the length because we don't have enough original material yet. But buy it, please. Again,
I have to go undecided. I'm a Motorhead fan now as an adult. As a teenager, when I first heard Ace of Spades, I liked that album. I just wasn't a big fan yet. I have to go undecided solely because I never really listened to it. To be honest with you, I haven't listened to a whole ton of Motorhead. I've heard a few albums here and there, but I haven't really dug real deep into it. I'm sure, I know us, I'm sure a ranking will come at some point, and I think I'll be able to give a little bit more of a synopsis then. But as of now, I've only heard a handful of Motorhead, and now as an adult, I like what I hear, but I skipped over the first album, so undecided.
Eric Dudka 6820, you did make a post already. You made two. There was only supposed to be one, but I'm going to allow this one because it is a different one.
Yeah.
I personally hate Cattle Decap's Human Jerky demos. I saw those as their debut for a bit. Honestly, I looked, and it does count as their debut, at least on the archives, and I agree, but I like it. I think that album is it's just gnarly grind. It's their reek of putrefaction. Like, yeah, the production is not the best. It's still not terrible. And, you know, it's just flat out just gore grind. Like, I don't think there's a song on there over a minute, and I'm not kind of like the hidden track at the end because
Right.
No. The main reason I agree is that literally every album after that got better. Like, they just kept getting better with each album, and I think they're absolutely fantastic now. But there's still some songs on there, granted they're very short, that I still like, especially Gestation of Smegma. And that's probably like one of the tamer titles on there, maybe. I don't know. It's pretty gross. But I do agree, though, just because the band got better. But I think it's actually good.
I'm going to agree with you as well. However, I really like that album. Of course, I like grind and I like gore grind, and Cradle got way better after that. They just got progressively better. Yeah, it was a rough start, and they definitely changed their sound to be less of a straightforward grind album and more of like grind elements along the way. Unclogged and Ready for Spewage, I think is a banger of a track. And of course, Gestation of Smegma, that just is a fun title. But yeah.
That's what you spread on the human jerky. There you go.
They got better over time and changed their sound a little bit here and there, and like now they're even more groovy, which is odd.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't even say like necessarily it's a rough start, because I think they probably put out exactly what they wanted to put out at the time. You know, it's just straight up grind, but you know, they kind of did the whole like Carcass evolution, except they skipped over the stupid Swan Song period. They've just been pretty much writing bangers. So I agree, but in a way I disagree that it's bad.
Right.
So yeah, we'll go with that. Robert Sparling 917. What's up, Robert? Gwar, hello. The production on it is bad. Honestly, I like that album, and I mean, it'd be like a distant spoiler alert. I ordered the anniversary edition that's coming out because it's one of the few Gwar albums I don't own, and it's one of the few Gwar albums that I don't own that I actually want. There's definitely some that I don't want, like We Kill Everything, which I just don't like that album. Hell, the band doesn't even like that album. But I kind of like Hello. Like, it's more of a goofy punk album. Like, oddly enough, it's kind of comparable to, like, early Red Hot Chili Peppers, except, you know, it's Gwar. So it's super offensive. It sounds dirty, and the guitars don't even really have like a metallic tone. Brocky really isn't doing like his full-on odorous impression with the vocals. And yeah, like this was like the early days before they even had like the costumes necessarily. Like they kind of did, but they were like very rudimentary. Gwar for me pretty much starts with Scum Dogs of the Universe. Yeah. I heard Slaughterama. That song absolutely rules. I became a fan, and I saw like the shit on like Beavis Butthead and their interviews on like Joan Rivers. Oh my God. Yeah, that band was just amazing. I think they did get a lot better.
Yes.
Like as musicians and as costume designers later on.
Dude.
And as far as like stage shows, it's Gwar, man. Gwar is amazing for a stage show. But I kind of like Hello, and I think they kind of started off the way they wanted to. And I don't know, I think it just kind of works. So I'm going to actually disagree. I don't think it was necessarily a rough start. It was a Gwar start.
I'm going to go undecided. The first thing I ever heard was Scum Dogs of the Universe, but I didn't hear it until probably like, I don't know, 97 or so. Todd Evans is from Toledo. I've known Todd for a long time. Of course, his work in Mobile Death Camp. But like when he was in Gwar, that was just a thing because Gwar used to come to this area a lot.
Yep.
And the first time I saw Gwar was out of costume, and I had no idea who the hell they were. And they came into the Wendy's I was working across the street from the venue that they were going to play, and that's how I first learned of Gwar. And then Rin showed me Scum Dogs of the Universe and This Toilet Earth, and that's kind of where I got into them. I will admit that although I've seen Gwar 3 times, I never really dug more into their catalog. I actually just thought that the stage show was grossly entertaining, because it is.
It was so much fun. I miss Dave Brocky. That one still kind of stings. I didn't get to see him live until they were touring on War Party, which I think is a really underrated album. Like, that album absolutely whoops ass. But yeah, I don't know. Like that first one, it's just kind of fun.
Our next one comes from James G. Warrior 1981. What's up, James? He picked 2 bands, but Nick, being the evil dickhead that he is, made him pick one. And he went with Inner Arma with Sundown.
All right, this is one that I don't own, and I own quite a lot of Inner Arma. I got into them, oh God, I think it was the Cavern EP, which that's like still like one like 40-minute song. But like Sky Burial and Paradise Gallows, God, I love those albums. Sundown is, I don't know, like it's kind of the same situation with like Cattle Decapitation, where like this band is still doing everything that they do well. They just kept doing it better. And Inter Arma is already kind of hard to explain anyway. It's black metal, it's death metal, it's sludge metal, it's post metal, and they weave it together so damn well. And they're doing that on that debut pretty well, but it's just they did it better on, you know, subsequent albums. So I kind of agree there, just because the band just keeps getting better. That new one, I'm still trying to get my head around everything that happens to my head when I listen to it. But I know it's brilliant musicianship and theming and writing. But yeah, I gotta agree here.
I again am going to go undecided. I've only heard a handful of Inter Arma. In fact, I think my first like full album sit down listen was this last one that we just reviewed, which was a killer album, and I need to go back and listen to more. And I'm kind of kicking myself for not going back already and listening to more, because I really like this band from what I've heard.
Paradise Gallows, you'll love it.
I'm sure. So yeah, I'm undecided as for now, but I am going to dig more into this because I really, really, really like what I heard.
Just another heavy metal maniac. What's up, man?
Hey.
Neurosis, Pain of Mind. Not a terrible album, but definitely not a good representation of Neurosis' unique and monolithic sound. Both of those descriptors are accurate.
Yes.
And honestly, I mean, I'll agree. I don't necessarily like dislike it. In fact, I mean, like I think The Word is Law is kind of like the one I think is like maybe the most uneven, but I don't think Neurosis became Neurosis until he hit Souls at Zero. Like that's where Neurosis became one of the heaviest, darkest, just most layered, dense things ever. But Pain of Mind, it's a punk album. It's straight up hardcore punk. It's fast, which is something you don't associate with Neurosis at all. And I don't know, like I kind of like it just as a snarling punk album. Like honestly, if that didn't say Neurosis on it, I'd be like totally okay with that just being like a one-off punk project with those same dudes, because they wrote some solid tunes there. I come back to that one every now and then, and generally when I do, like I go downstairs and like, oh, what version of this? Oh, yep, I have the Bud Dwyer version, because they use that as the album cover. It's quite something else.
I have that version too. I bought Pain of Mind thinking that it would be more along the lines of, you know, the albums I really liked: Souls at Zero, Through Silver and Blood, Times of Grace, A Sun That Never Sets. Like I'm a pretty giant Neurosis fan, so I bought this record after already hearing what I liked and popped it in. I was like, what the fuck is this? And I never really went back to it. And I own also the Bud Dwyer version of it. I agree with you based on the fact that, you know, the things I've heard that I've loved was everything after that. From my cold, dead hands, you'd have to work to pry Silver and Blood away from me.
Yeah, that was my first Neurosis album.
Oh my God.
Kind of a standard setter right there.
Yep. 440000 Studios says Asphyx with The Rack. Gotta say, the production is raw as all get out, and not in a good way. And the vocals sound like a drugged-up hobbit after snorting one of Gandalf's special blue potions. I actually don't like this album at all. It's terrible.
Edgar, you're grounded. Disagree. Oh my God, dude, The Rack is one of my favorite Asphyx albums. Last One on Earth, I think, is maybe a bit of a improvement, but The Rack, I think, is a banger. That is snarling, ugly, kind of, I mean, I don't even know if I could call it like death doom at that point, but there's definitely some like doomy moments. But dude, it's like a more vicious bolt thrower at times. And I love Martin Van Drunen's vocals. I still have no idea how he does them and maintains the ability to speak. But that kind of thing, like it is so harrowing. He sounds like a ghoul, like shouting at the bottom of a well. And I wouldn't let him out because he'd probably eat me. But I love that album. That album is absolutely amazing. Ooh, you were in trouble?
Edgar, you're grounded.
You're grounded.
I have to go undecided. My introduction to Asphyx was not until, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. And I liked what I heard, and I just haven't dove back in the catalog. I'm probably gonna, because they're gonna be at MDF, and I'm really excited to see them, and I want to be more well-versed in their catalog before I see them, just so I can be like, yeah, I saw him play all the fucking killer songs I wanted to see him play.
Probably played some off the rack, too.
Right. So I have to go undecided, but based on what Nick said and his reaction and saying that you're grounded, I have to listen to this, because it sounds like it probably is something I'm really going to like. And I'm going to have to come back and also tell you whether or not you're grounded. We may not have the good parent, bad parent dynamic here. We may both tell you you're grounded. So, yeah, haven't heard it, but I'm going to.
Lighter357, I would have to go with Haken's Aquarius. It's not a bad album by any means, but I rarely, if ever, come back to it purely because it lacked identity, which is common when you start, but man, it sounds like a Dream Theater album from start to finish. The talent was there. You can see that better stuff was yet to come. Visions being a step in the right direction for them, and the rest is history. Like, I don't think it's a rough start, though. Like, I think they made a name for themselves. Granted, yeah, it does sound like a Dream Theater album. I think Vision sounds like a Dream Theater album, too. And Dream Theater is kind of pockmarked all over their albums. That's just one of their influences, but they bring in those classic prog influences like I Still Hear Yes, Gentle Giant, stuff like that. I don't know. I kind of disagree, because I have that one. I have all of Haken stuff. I love that band. And in a lot of ways, they've kind of replaced Dream Theater in my rotation for that style of prog. I just think they're kind of doing it better. But I also would argue that they did improve, with each album. Like The Mountain, I think, is absolutely fantastic. Affinity is, I think, their best album still. That's
a god tier record.
But, I mean, I kind of disagree that it was a rough start. Like, I think it's kind of the start they needed to make. And I think overall, the songs, I mean, there's a lot of bands that sound like Dream Theater, but I think they did it well, and then it did evolve into something I think that is mostly their own.
I have to go undecided as of for right now as well. I've yet to listen to that album. I had never heard of Haken until Nick showed me Affinity, and I fell in love almost instantaneously. And pretty much everything they've put out after that has been pretty fucking awesome. I really enjoyed The Mountain. I just never went before that. I probably will, because I adore Haken. I think they're a great band. I love what they're doing. And the vocals, I just love Ross Jennings as a vocalist. I think he has a great range. I think his presentation is spot on. We saw Haken, and it was awesome, and I, again, need to listen to this album because I love the band. I just never heard it, so undecided. User GJ6WI7UI1V.
Whatever. Oh, that guy.
That guy. He says, I personally enjoy this album. I actually think it's better than some of their later work. But Summoning's Lugburs is an album that I know a lot of their fans dislike. In fact, the band members themselves have disowned it and considered Mina's Morgul to be their real debut. The reason for the negativity towards Lugburs is that it is stylistically the outlier of their discography. All of the following albums are within the atmospheric black metal subgenre, which they actually pioneered, while the debut is more straightforward black metal and is perhaps more reminiscent of Abigor than the later Summoning. It is by far the most extreme release in their discography.
I've never heard it. Honestly, I really haven't jammed much Summoning at all. It's just, there's so many bands. I just never got a chance to get around to them, so I gotta go undecided on this one.
I also gotta go undecided. I've actually never heard of them. Once again, I like some atmospheric black metal, so maybe I'll have to check it out, but I've never heard it.
Yeah. Philip D08739 says Sepultura Morbid Visions. Up there with the worst sounding debut, dog shit trash can snare and production, sloppy timing too. In some albums, raw sound elevates vibes. Transylvanian Hunger. I disagree there. This buries the mood. Re-recording slap. Love you guys. Your channel makes my days more bearable. Edit. It's not just it sounds awful. It doesn't match up to the other Max Sepultura albums. I kind of gotta agree. Like, all right. I think the appreciation of this album grew, like, over time. Like, it's completely dwarfed in, like, a lot of the Max Cavalera stuff. I mean, Schizophrenia, Beneath the Remains, Arise, like...
Yeah.
They went on a killer run in terms of that death thrash era. And while I think that Morbid Visions is very influential, especially now, I don't think it was as influential back then, and I don't think it made as much of an impact. They were very young. it was definitely sloppy. I mean, they didn't have a lot of money to get like great recording.
Right.
And, you know, they were just kids playing the stuff that they love. Like there's a lot of like, you know, Celtic Frost in there and shit like that. And for the most part, I think they did all right with what they had, but they got a lot better. Like Schizophrenia, in terms of like the composition, is like night and day compared to Morbid Visions. Maybe a little bit in the production. I don't know, the production's not great on that one either. But yeah, I kind of got to agree. Like Sepultura became Sepultura, I think, with their own sound, with like Schizophrenia and then beyond.
Yeah, I agree with Nick, and I agree with you. It did sound terrible, and the timing was bad. And once again, when bands start, it's not always the best right out of the gate, which is why we're here. And like Nick said, even with Schizophrenia, it definitely improved from Morbid Visions. Yeah, the re-recording absolutely slaps, and I think that's what they were trying to do in the beginning. They just couldn't afford it. So yeah, I would agree. It's not the strongest record, and much later they get much better. And yeah. Ivan Lopez 9148 says Carcass with Reek of Putrefaction. I like it, but damn is that album's production very muddy. Yeah.
the production's terrible.
It's awful.
It's awful, but I can't quite call it a rough start. I know they didn't get the production they wanted, but at the same time, this album is immensely influential. This is the birth of gore grind.
Yep.
Like a lot of the tropes of Carcass came from this album. It's kind of sloppy and muddy, but it's kind of just good, gory fun, and still has some of the most gross song titles out there, like Regurgitated Giblets and Vomited Anal Tract. How do you beat that?
You don't.
Well, yeah, I mean, gore grind bands have since tried, and I think they've had like, I don't know, like how you measure success with that. Like, how close to vomiting were you when you read this out loud?
Shit-filled bathtub. Okay.
That's fine. I've seen that before.
Yep.
But I don't know. Like, I can't necessarily call it a rough start, even though it kind of is. I guess I agree. Maybe. I don't know. You know what? I'm going to go undecided. I'm going to go undecided just because I don't know. Like, I don't know if it was necessarily a rough start because it really did kind of, you know, make them a brand, and it inspired, again, a whole other subset of metal.
I'm going to agree with you that the production was dog shit. It's absolutely awful.
Oh, it's terrible.
It's terrible. I'm going to disagree with you on the fact that it was a rough start. It created a whole subgenre. It created grind. It created gore grind. It really spoke in volumes. I mean, obviously, this band changed their sound over the years. You know, Heartwork is a god tier album. But I wouldn't call this a rough start. I would call this exactly what they wanted to do and exactly what they were all about during that time period and when they started. They were a gore grind band when they started, and they gave you a gore grind album. And look at gore grind today. There's still albums out there that sound like complete shit, but grind fans love them.
It's because of this album.
Yeah, it's because of this album, right? So while I will agree that it sounds fucking horrible, I'll disagree with it being a rough start.
The haki guy, we thought it was haiku before, but it wasn't. We appreciate the haiku you wrote in the comments, though. That was awesome. I said Obscura's Retribution in reply to the video you guys made. Like I said, it's not a bad album at all, and there's definitely a lot of cool stuff on there, including a cover of one of my favorite Death songs. But I just think the 5 albums that came out after it are leaps and bounds better. Cosmogenesis was really where their sound came together. I will agree. I actually went back and jammed it. Retribution, it is kind of a rough start. Like, you know, production's not quite there. The songs, well, technical and flashy, they're not put together as well.
Yeah.
I got into them with Cosmogenesis. That was the first album I heard, and then Omnibium blew me away too. Most of Obscura's stuff is just flat out amazing. But I do think that this is kind of a rough start because honestly, I go back for the cover songs. The Lack of Comprehension cover is awesome. Synthetically Revived, originally done by Suffocation, is amazing. But for me, the winner is God of Emptiness. They crush that cover. It is just as filthy and sinister and evil sounding as the original, albeit with like a German accent on the clean parts. But yeah, I would say it is kind of a rough start because legit, I think pretty much every album after that is better.
Yep. I will also agree with you. Pretty much every album after that is better. I also got into Obscura with Cosmogenesis in that album absolutely destroys. And while I will say that there are a couple of cool things on Retribution, most notably the cover songs, again, the God of Emptiness cover is, oh my god. Yeah, I don't think the band at Retribution had really quite found what they were trying to do yet. Like, we were all kind of reeling in from the absence of Necrophagist, and along comes Obscura, and they're like, well, here, let us try. And, of course, notably they shared a band member too, so there was that. But I don't really think it was kind of put together in the way that they really wanted it to be put together yet. Like, the signs are there, but they just didn't quite make it. And then Cosmogenesis and everything after that, it's just fucking awesome. I love Obscura, but I will agree that Retribution was a rough start.
Of Moonlight and Grave, typo negative, slow, deep, and hard. As I understand it, the material on this album was written for Carnivore and got reworked as Typo's debut. The result of that is a really messy, almost sludge album, ? I don't know if it's a sludge album, which is creative in its own right, being unmistakably Typo, but not as coherent as Life of Agony's similar blend of sounds on their debut, or early doomy thrash like Celtic Frost and Dream Death. Ah, man, I love Slow, Deep, and Hard. It's kind of a novelty. Like, I mean, the cover is great, especially when you clear up what the image actually is.
Yes.
The more punky side that you don't really hear later on, like they kind of abandoned like all the punk and crossover stuff pretty much after Bloody Kisses. Like everything got very slow and dreary and more mid-tempo. But I don't know. Like I still really like Slow, Deep, and Hard. So I don't know. I don't think it was necessarily a rough start, like, because I think it did put them on the map at least a little bit. Like, Bloody Kisses definitely outdid it, though.
Yeah.
Like, without a doubt. But I don't know. Like, it's still fun. Yeah, there's some definite Carnivore leftovers on there, but they're good leftovers. Like, you can reheat those, and they're just fine. They taste almost as good as the day they were served, maybe. I'm going to go undecided. I'm not really sure if I could call it a rough start because, I mean, I don't know. It still seemed like it was a pretty successful start, but, I mean, it completely dwarfed by the second album, of course.
I'm going to go undecided as well. It's definitely not Bloody Kisses. I think we can all agree there. But, I mean, it was the start of Typo Negative. It put them on the map. I will admit that up until we did the Typo ranking, I wasn't the world's biggest Typo Negative fan. I did like Bloody Kisses, of course. But, after we did the ranking and I really got to pick the band apart, there wasn't like there was a total shit sandwich in the mix, And it was different for them, but it was still Typo Negative, so I don't really know what to answer that. So I'm going to go undecided as well. Thrash Zone 521 says, Kreator's Endless Pain. Sure, it's still good, but compared to something like Extreme Aggression, not even close.
I mean, it's nowhere near Extreme Aggression. I love that album. I don't know, I kind of got to disagree because that album is super influential, not just to thrash metal, but also like black metal. Like black metal definitely took some stuff from that album in particular. I like that album a lot. Like it is fast paced, it's raw. Like, yeah, the production's not the best. I don't think the production's the best on Pleasure to Kill, but it doesn't stop me from enjoying those albums. It's just insanely aggressive. Great cover art too. I mean, I don't know. Like I don't think it's a rough start. Like, honestly, I would say, like, Sodom's first album might be a rougher start than Kreator's. Kreator came out sounding maybe a little bit more polished than their contemporaries at the time. So I'm going to go ahead and disagree on this one. But, good pick, though. That's just fun to talk about that album.
I have to go undecided. I've never heard it. There we are. I've heard a lot of Kreator over the years. Again, my journey into thrash metal took a little while, too. I was pretty close-minded for a long time with most music and haven't heard it, but I think I need to hear it. I think I need to hear more Kreator, period. So, undecided, but, whatever. We'll get there.
Adam Chastain, 7089. Thin Lizzy's debut is possibly their weakest. Not outright terrible, but a lot of meandering, low-energy rock. It sounds like a band trying different styles to find their own sound. I would agree. Honestly, I'd say that for the first two albums. I'm not really a fan of that one either. Vagabonds of the Western World is kind of where Thin Lizzy comes together for me. And spoiler alert, I got a copy of that, and that's going to be in a collection update soon. But, like that first album, I've jammed it before. I went back and jammed it again. It's not necessarily one that I'm like, oh, I have to get that to complete the collection. It's like, well, if I find it for a reasonable price, I'll get it, because it is very low energy. Like, you don't get like the big, like, harmonized riffs and like just everything I love about Thin Lizzy is not on that album, outside of Phil Lynotte's like awesome bass lines and his cool vocals. But yeah, it doesn't have that same punch. There's a lot more like acoustic and clean playing on there. I don't know. Like, I think once they got Vagabonds and then kind of beyond there, they really found their sound. And by the time they get to like Johnny the Fox and fucking, Jailbreak and just so many fucking awesome albums, you kind of just forget about that debut and the second one too. So yeah, I agree.
I'm undecided. I haven't listened to much Thin Lizzy. I probably need to as well.
You should.
I just kind of skipped over that band over the years. And I've heard so many people talk about Thin Lizzy, and I hear this guy talk about Thin Lizzy all the time. I'm like, man, you know what? I should probably listen to Thin Lizzy. And then I get in my car and I turn on something different and then I forget about it. So, like, I don't know. But someday I'll get there and I'll be able to give you a more, again, detailed, valued opinion. But right now I don't have one because I haven't heard it and, whatever. There we are. Luis Del Palacio, IE. There's a bunch of eyes.
There's a bunch of eyes.
Yep. 9579 says, Cradle of Filth, the principle of evil made flesh. It's not offensively bad or anything. It's just a bit rough, in my opinion. They would, however, knock it out of the park on the next album.
I am not a Cradle of Filth fan. And most of that is due to Danny Filth's shrieking vocals. The dude screams like someone's holding a lit match under his balls. I cannot stand his shrieks. Like, they are nails on a fucking chalkboard to me. And that kind of ruins a lot of their music. Like, I've definitely tried, like listening to some of their stuff in the past, and that's the wall. His vocal cords are the fucking wall. And I just can't do it. Even going over the last one, which is the only Cradle of Filth album I own. Music, thought was fine. Thought it was good. Well written. Well composed. You have a shrieking midget as a frontman who likes to paint himself up as the devil with, like, it looks like his mom's lipstick. Like, it was all shiny and shit. I don't know. I don't like Danny Filth's vocals. We'll go with that.
Yeah. I'm also going to say undecided simply because I don't like Cradle of Filth either. I had a buddy in high school that loved Cradle of Filth, and I tried. I really did. I tried. And the vocals were the turnoff. I can't. Vocals, I think, have ruined a lot of my tastes over the years. Bad vocals have ruined a lot of decent music, and while I'll say that their music isn't bad, it's not really great either. It's somewhat generic, but whatever. I don't like Cradle of Filth. I've never liked Cradle of Filth. I don't plan on liking Cradle of Filth. I've never heard this record, but I don't care because I don't like Cradle of Filth.
I think it's supposed to be their more death metal one. I don't know. I mean, again, maybe he's not shrieking on this one. I don't know. Maybe I'll listen to it, but
probably not.
God, I just can't take his voice.
I can't either. I don't understand people's obsession with that dude. I really don't.
Nadine the Rescue Hound. What's up, man? Death, Scream, Bloody Gore. Whew, okay. In my opinion, is the only album in Death's catalog where Chuck couldn't quite, for whatever reason, live up to the insanely high standards he created for himself. It wasn't that Scream Bloody Gore was a bad album, far from it. But I think if you asked Chuck, if you gave him a mulligan, he'd pick Scream Bloody Gore. Leprosy was, so far, leaps and friggin' bounds better than Scream Bloody Gore. Scream Bloody Gore was like the water breaking for Chuck before giving birth to death metal with Leprosy. I gotta disagree. I think Scream Bloody Gore is, one of the most like foundational albums in death metal. I think it is refined on Leprosy because Leprosy is the GOAT for me. Like that's the standard for death, especially for like early death metal. Everything I love about death metal in general shows up on Leprosy. Yep. And to a degree, it does also show up on Scream Bloody Gore. But it's still got a little bit more of the thrash to it. And, it's a little bit looser. It's a little bit more raw. But it works. Like, there are tons of bands that were influenced by that one as well. Iconic album cover, Zombie Ritual. Oh, man, dude.
Yep, right.
Dude, there's so many good songs. Evil Dead. I love Evil Dead. I can't say it's a rough start because I really feel like the brand was just super established right there. Like once people saw that and, were kind of drawn to the cover and the look, and then hearing it, it sounded different at the time. Like, it didn't quite sound like Possessed Seven Churches. It had something a little bit grittier and dirtier and darker, and yeah, I gotta disagree.
I also have to disagree. Now, I will admit that when I first heard Scream Bloody Gore, I was turned off by the production. But as I got more into Death, I just realized how pretty much awesome Scream Bloody Gore was, and how it again set kind of a trend as far as extreme music was concerned. It's just such a good album. It may not be, everything that modern death metal is today with some of its tropes, but like Scream Bloody Gore had its own identity even back then as a pretty killer fucking album. And once again, Zombie Ritual is on that album, man. Like, what are you doing?
Chris Reifert's on that album, man.
right.
That's almost like kind of like the start for a whole other separate awesome band, too.
Right. So yeah, I'm gonna have to disagree with you there, brother. Oliver Walker, 1978, says, absolutely not a rocky start, and I played this album a lot when it came out, yet prefer much everything that came after Mastodon's Remission. I agree with you that it's not an absolutely rocky start. As far as preferring much everything that came after, I don't think Mastodon has a bad record.
No.
Now, first of all, I want to say as an addendum, this is not the start of Mastodon. It is their first full length. I own the Life's Blood EP and Call of the Mastodon, which is where they started technically. But I don't think there's a bad Mastodon album. And I'll go back and jam Remission all the time, dude. Trainwreck is one of my favorite Mastodon songs ever.
Oh, dude, Mother
Puncher, yeah. Ooh. And most of that record, I adore that album. So I can't say that I much prefer everything after. I much prefer all of Mastodon.
Yeah, I mean, going back to my ranking, Remission is number 4, I believe, on my list. And I love it. Granted, it is the world's longest drum fill.
Yes.
But it's an impressive drum fill.
Yes.
Yeah, dude. Mother Puncher. Dude, the first song I ever heard by Mastodon was March the Fire Ants.
Yep.
And it made me a fan right away. And, I mean, even in terms of a band perspective, I think they made a name for themselves with that debut, pretty solidly.
Yeah.
The hype was built up, and then Leviathan dropped and just melted faces.
Oh, man.
Yeah. His face, too. So, yeah, I agree with you that it is not a rocky start. I think it's a fantastic debut, but I do think that there are at least 3 other albums that I think are better, and one of them is definitely Leviathan. Adam Can't Fathom. I bet you can. Come on, if you really tried at it. Mgla, Groza. Their debut is arguably the weakest of the discography, including the EPs. Just largely unmemorable listen. Honestly, I probably agree. I got into them with Age of Excuse, and I love that album. I think, honestly, that might be a big influence for Garia. It's very, very similar to the drum work on that album. Is absolutely insane. But I think they do a really good job with the haunting atmosphere. It's a lot of tremolos, but there's a lot of good riffs and breakdowns on it. I dig Age of Excuse. Groza, I own. And, I mean, I think it's good. It's a good starting point, but they got a lot better. And, I mean, honestly, I think it's just kind of peaked with Age of Excuse. So, yeah, I would kind of agree there, yeah.
I have to go undecided. I haven't listened to much Mgla, but I need to. A lot of what I like about black metal as I get more into it, I think this band houses. And I just haven't heard enough of it to be able to tell you yay or nay. Like I said, I'm just scraping the surface of getting into black metal. So, yeah, undecided as for now, but I'll get there, and I'll let you know.
I mean, you like Uwada, and you like Garia. I think you'll probably like Mgla.
Master Debater 1313. I love it. I love that name. Keep it forever. Maiden's first and second, for that matter. I'm just not a Diano guy.
You're half right. I mean, I will agree that Maiden's first album is a bit of a rocky start. They didn't get the production they wanted. There's no Adrian Smith on there. Granted, some great songs. Remember Tomorrow, Phantom of the Opera. Phantom of the Opera is a fantastic song. Honestly, I like the live versions that I've heard of it more than the actual album version, because the production's really kind of flat, and Maiden deserved bigger sound. I totally disagree with you on the second album. Killers Whoops Ass, honestly, one of my favorite Maiden albums. I actually, if I was going to correct my ranking, I would probably put that one above Number of the Beast. Like, Killers is a fantastic album. I mean, all right, I get not liking Di'Anno, but I also don't get not liking Di'Anno on Killers, because that album just flat out rules. I think his vocals on there are killer.
Yeah.
Haha.
Killer, haha. Yep, I'm also going to half agree with you and half disagree. Yeah, Maiden's first record is not the greatest by any means. And while there are a couple of good songs on there, it was definitely not my favorite of the Iron Maiden albums. Killers whoops ass. Plain and simple. I don't need to do any explanation. Killers is an amazing album. Yeah, the first Iron Maiden's a rocky start. But yeah, Killers whoops ass.
John Edmiston 684 says DRI with the Dirty Rotten LP. It's not bad as a raw hardcore debut, but most of the songs from that record were recycled onto Dealing With It with better production and tighter musicianship. Then they shifted their direction more towards their iconic, sound with Crossover, all the way to Full Speed Ahead in '95. Honestly, I'd agree, and I don't know, there's almost like an asterisk on there because, like, I have the Dirty Rotten LP, and it is essentially a compilation because it's a lot of their earlier stuff, like the early EPs and such, namely the Dirty Rotten EP and some other ones. But I guess you could count it as their first album. Like, I always counted Dealing With It as the first one, but a lot of the same songs. It's just Dealing With It sounds so much better. So I guess if we're counting that as their first album, I would agree. But also, again, I'm not sure because I've always greeted that one as a comp. But yeah, for the sake of argument, I definitely agree.
I'm going to have to go undecided again. I've heard DRI. We've seen them live, and I thought they absolutely crushed when we saw them live. I had a great time at that show. But I never just went back and really listened to it just because I kind of forgot to go back and listen to it. And now, our buddy Danny Walker's touring with DRI, and that's cool. And I just need to listen to more of it just to listen to it. But I haven't done it yet. Like I said, I just kind of forgot about it.
Griffin Bratton, 8903, Ministry with Sympathy. Not really the worst new wave in the world, but it feels a bit weird hearing Al be a little less gruff. I agree. For me, Ministry starts with Land of Rape and Honey. I'm not the biggest fan of Twitch, and With Sympathy is, it's a new wave album. Al's singing with this, like, faux English accent. It's so un-Al. And I got into him with A Mind Is a Terrible Thing to Taste, and I love that album. And then I got Psalm 69, and oh my god, that's like one of the best industrial metal albums of all time. With Sympathy, I thought I was listening to like a Human League album. I like Human League, but it says Ministry on it, so my expectations are decidedly different. I suppose it's all right for what it is, but honestly, when I want to listen to Ministry, this is never the album I think of. So, yeah, I actually got to agree.
I have to go undecided. I've stated it before, I'll state it again. Never been the world's biggest industrial metal fan. I have heard of Psalm 69. I do like that album, but I never went beyond that just because industrial metal was never my thing. And that's just a personal taste. So, yeah, I'm just going to say undecided. Again, I like Psalm 69, but I'm not an industrial metal fan.
Mine's a terrible thing to taste, man. It's got Burning Inside and Thieves on it. I think you'd probably like it.
Maybe I'll give it a shot. I'm guessing I probably shouldn't give this record a shot because it's a pretty...
I said, if you want to listen to, like, early Depeche Mode, but not early Depeche Mode, I guess, that'd be the thing to listen to. Honestly, it's pretty skippable.
Evil11079 says, Sventevith by Behemoth is a particularly awful debut, just messy and incredibly basic black metal. I have to go undecided, I've never heard it. Again, my journey with black metal, blah, blah, blah. When I started with Behemoth, I started with Zoskia Cutlass, which I really liked, and then I heard Demigod and I really liked it. The Apostasy whooped unholy ass. The Satanist whooped unholy ass. I like bits and pieces of Behemoth. I have never gone back, and I have no idea. I just have none idea behind Zoskia Cutlass, and somebody gave me a copy of that record back years ago when I was working at a gas station. Some guy came in and gave me a whole book full of burned CDs.
I'm not a big fan of the early black metal Behemoth. I own Grom. I own From the Pagan Vastlands and the Forest Dreams Eternally, or whatever it's called. And they're okay. And this is the only one I don't own as far as the full lengths. And I remember jamming it years ago going, and then I jammed it again. I kind of went, eh. It's just, it's exactly as he described it. It's just very basic, like kind of melodic black metal. Like, you know, it's got raw production, heavy tremolos. The melodies are kind of stock. Yeah, like it's just there. Like, it just sounds like, you know, any second wave black metal, but without like the character. Yeah, it's a pretty unremarkable debut. I definitely agree. And yeah, I got into him with Demigod, so it took me a while to like really go back and check out all the other stuff. Like, I think I just got Thelema 6 like a couple of years ago, so or it might have been even a year ago. And I got that thinking I actually completed the discography, and then I forgot. Like, oh yeah, there's the debut. Maybe I'll just skip that one. Crustacean Cregory. That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah.
Haunted, 6 Feet Under. Rest of their discography sucks too. Honestly, that's one where I would say maybe Haunted is their best one. But, you know, I'm sure a lot of people have already heard me say, yeah, no, it's leftover Obituary riffs that Alan West brought over to Barnsley. You want to play these because Obituary didn't want them. And 6 Feet Under was born. It's an okay album. I'm pretty sure this was just a joke post, but yeah, of course I was going to read it because it's 6 Feet Under. Yeah, I'm going to disagree if this is the actual argument here, even though I know it's a joke post. But yeah, I don't like 6 Feet Under. It's not a secret by now.
Yep. I'm going to disagree as well. I can't stand 6 Feet Under. Haunted may be one of their best releases, albeit still not real great.
The standard is fucking.
Yeah, I mean the bar is.
I need to dig a hole to find the standard.
And we're in the basement right now, so I mean, like it's bad.
Probably should go down another 6 feet to find the standard.
And like I've always said, I like one song off of True Carnage. I like Torture Killer. That's actually pretty much all of the 6 Feet Under I like. So. Yeah, I don't like 6 Feet Under. And I don't think anybody thinks we do.
Yeah.
And the last and final question from our buddy Thrash Maniac 99.
What's up, Levi?
Hello, Levi.
Got one in just under the wire.
Thrash Maniac 99 says, Avenged Sevenfold, sounding the seventh trumpet. Not bad, but not something they revisit much at all.
God, I mean, I think they've written clunkier albums since, but I don't think that debut is particularly that good. I bought it after getting Waking the Fallen, which I really liked at the time. Going back, I don't like it as much. But Sounding the Seventh Trumpet, I've always had an issue with M. Shadow's vocals, whether they're clean or harsh, and in this case, harsh. Well, actually, there's clean vocals on here, too, that aren't good. But, yeah, his harsh vocals on here that sound terrible. And, like, I mean, it's very stock metalcore with, like, a lot of, like, Iron Maiden-y parts to sound a little bit more melodic. It's not particularly focused. You know, the songwriting, I don't think, is particularly that good. Like, they did pretty much everything better on Waking the Fallen, and then they made City of Evil and kind of, I don't know, maybe sold out. I don't know, whatever. I don't like that album very much either. But I will probably agree here that this probably wasn't the best start for them as far as a full length. I think, an EP before that. It also wasn't great. But we're going with full lengths and debuts, and yeah, I agree.
I can't even say undecided. I've never been an Avenged Sevenfold fan. Albeit I will say that the last album that they wrote on acid was entertaining simply because it was entertaining.
I still think they fleeced the label. I was like, oh yeah, the budget for this, it's millions now.
Right.
We're going to bring in the whole Philharmonic.
Yep.
You know, the Army of Didgeridoos.
Army of Didgeridoos.
Yeah. An entire circus.
Yep.
Yeah, they're going to set the studio on fire and then juggle it. Yeah. I appreciate that because I think it was kind of revenge too, but anyway.
Yeah, I've never really been a fan of this band. The Rev was a decent drummer from what I heard, and now we don't even have that. So, yeah, this band came out, and I think I was already to a point where I was kind of past this sound of metal and was starting to move into more death metal territory, and I think I just kind of wrote this band off. But from what I have heard of it, meh.
And that is it. Thank you for all of your responses. This was a lot of fun to go through, and I appreciate the non-metal ones that popped up in there. Like, it was really fun to talk about Huey Lewis, the News. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I fucking love Huey Lewis, the News.
The power of love.
But yeah, we are working on some other ideas for some other discussion topics as well, so there's going to be more of these in the future. And once again, thank you to all of our fans for making these submissions, because, again, this was a lot of fun to talk about.
Yeah, we surely appreciate you guys.
So, once again, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel. Up in the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have t-shirts, both old and new. The old ones are discounted, provided we have your size. And we even have hats too, so if you're looking for any of that, click the link down below.
And as always, tons of stuff going on at Thralls of Metal. Album reviews, discography rankings, discussion panels such as this one, Nick's never-ending collection updates, states of metal, is it not metal, live streams, a ton of stuff. Right now, it's almost 3:30 in the morning. I promise all of you guys, we do this because of you. We appreciate all of you, all of our family, our friends, our subscribers. We can't thank you enough for making Thralls of Metal as big as it is. It blows my mind every time. We just appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, you guys absolutely rule, and tons of content coming in the future. So one more big thank you because of all your rulage, and we will catch you later.